Now, I'm sure you recognize what this car is. It's the brand new Mercedes AMG GLC 43 4MATIC Coupe. And as such, it remains the sister car, the more practical alternative to the C43 sedan. Now, we've had an AMG GLC 43 in India before, but that was the first generation model. This is the new one, but the proposition remains the same. It's a practical go-anywhere sports car for the family with higher ground clearance that lets you withstand some of the bombed out roads we have here in India, particularly in the monsoon like this. You could even bring it to a field like I have, though I don't recommend it. However, because it's based on the latest C43, there is a big change right here under the hood, and a rather controversial one at that. And also, like the new C43, the price appears to have gone up quite a bit. Now, I will talk about both those things later in the video, but for now, why don't you tell me down in the comments what you think about the new GLC 43? Is it the perfect go-anywhere sports car for India? Let us know. While you're down there, why not click subscribe if you like this sort of thing? And if you enjoyed the rest of the video, do click on that thumbs up button. We would really appreciate it. So, AMG Coupe SUV. That's a lot of contrasting ideas, so what do we think? Based on the latest GLC SUV, the new AMG 43 Coupe version inherits its larger, more muscular appearance, albeit with a sloping roof that slams down aggressively aft of the B-pillar. Now, integrating such a roof on a chunky SUV is often tricky, more so in smaller SUVs, as they still have to maintain some sense of space on the inside. But Mercedes has achieved this by stretching the roof back to the very edge of the car. This, combined with the slim LED tail lamps, does make the rear look a little bulky, but it's all part of that sporty coupe SUV persona, accentuated by a generous lip spoiler and quad exhaust tips below. Up front, there'll be no doubt that you've got the AMG version thanks to the chrome-slatted Panamericana grille, but there are subtler touches like the chin spoiler, aero curtains, and the sportier air intake surrounds. These would probably stand out more on a different paint shade. The car for India gets the night package as standard, which replaces much of the chrome with gloss black trim, and also the high-tech digital light LED headlamps, which get a special 2/DRL signature and projector elements, unlike the standard GLC. The boot is listed at a substantial 545 litres, though of course the sloping roof eats into it a bit, as does the compartment for the spare wheel. But hey, it's better than not having a spare wheel in our conditions. Speaking of wheels, while 20 inches are standard, you can also have this handsome set of optional 21-inch wheels sitting on low-profile tyres, 265s up front and 295s at the back. Complementing these are brushed metal side steps beneath the doors, which look great but aren't really functional. You'll see why in a moment as we check out the back seat. Now, the rear seat in the standard GLC is already not the best around, so as you might imagine, in this coupe version, it's a step further back still. First, you got to step in over this wide sill and a big footstep outside and duck under this low roofline. And once you're sat in place, you'll find the cushioning is quite firm, the seat back is quite upright, and the seat squab is quite small, so thigh support is not great. Still, knee room is decent. I'm just under 5'8". These seats are set to my driving position, and I've got a decent amount of knee room. But headroom, as you might imagine from the coupe version, is lacking quite a bit. What's more, the windows are quite small, and the sunroof doesn't come all the way back, so you do feel a little bit cooped up back in here. But then this is an AMG, so you might be willing to compromise on the back seat a little bit, because all the action happens in that front seat over there. Now, if you've ever been inside a regular GLC or a C-Class, this interior won't feel unfamiliar to you, and that's no bad thing at all, because I think this is one of the better designed interiors. I just love the way it looks. I love these metallic AC vents that click to shut and have ambient lighting inside them. I love this waterfall design for the dashboard, and I love a lot of the cool metallic effect that they have here. The screen's also so crisp, so smooth in their animation, and this big touchscreen here that works just so slickly, although yes, I do feel that it swallowed up far too many physical controls. In fact, a lot of the buttons have gone touch now, like on the steering wheel and the seat controls, which is a bit of a faff to use. Also, while quality in general is pretty good, especially when it comes to the leather and the stitching, some of the plastics feel a little too plasticky, and there are some oddities like this door that just refuses to stay shut. But no, what makes this particular cabin exceptionally special is the work that AMG has done to make it feel extra sporty. There's red stitching just about everywhere, on the front of the dash, on the back of the dash, along the doors, on the seats as well, just so supportive and hold you so nicely with a wide array of adjustment. These red seat belts, of course, and this trim, which is now this metallic carbonish effect both on the top and the bottom. But really, what sells it for me most is this steering wheel, which is a slightly smaller diameter but quite thick. These lovely metallic paddles that are quite large and sit behind, and these shortcut buttons that let you access a bunch of AMG features on the fly. I'll tell you more about them when I'm driving. There's also a heads-up display that puts relevant information right in your line of sight, and that all sort of brings it together to make you more involved in the driving experience. Before we get going though, a quick word on the features list, which as you can imagine is quite vast. Highlights include the crisp 360-degree cameras, 64 color ambient lighting, active park assist, 9 airbags, wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, a wireless charger, heated front seats, although not cooled, and a 15-speaker Burmester sound system. There's also a fingerprint scanner and a host of electronic safety aids, including some ADAS features. And with that, let's get moving. So let's start by addressing the elephant in the room, shall we? The GLC 43 has been given a dose of downsizing. Where the previous car came with a 3-liter V6 engine, this one has a 2-liter 4-cylinder. But don't lose hope just yet, because this car has a 48-volt mild hybrid system and some tech borrowed from F1 no less, chief of which is an electric turbocharger. What that means is the turbo can be spooled up faster for minimal turbo lag. And as for the power outputs, it's up to 421 horsepower and 500 Newton meters of torque. That torque figure is actually 20 Nm less than before, but that's before you account for the additional 14 horsepower and 150 Nm of electric boost you get from this powertrain under hard acceleration. How does that all feel? Well, let me dial it up to Sport Plus and show you. It is strong! So make no mistake, you're never going to be wanting for go in this car. What you will also no doubt have noticed is that moving up to Sport Plus mode has made things a whole lot louder. Yes, some of that is coming through the speakers, but what the hell, it goads you on to go faster, doesn't it? And while on the topic of modes, there are quite a few of them. It goes all the way from individual to snow to comfort to sport, Sport Plus, and even race mode. Wasn't expecting that in an SUV. But even if you don't choose the individual mode, you can play with almost all of the settings individually thanks to these shortcut buttons over here. The one on the right chooses the drive mode, whereas here you can toggle through a number of different individual parameters like the sound, the suspension, the ESP on and off, and even something called AMG Dynamics, which, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what that is. So yes, in true AMG fashion, those drive modes affect everything from the powertrain to the steering to the suspension and even the sound. And after a bit of driving, I do find that for our road conditions, Sport is just the perfect Goldilocks mix. But let's go back up to Sport Plus or Race even to see if we can get the most out of this GLC 43. A quick mention here must go to the displays that you can pull up on both these screens. I've set this driver's display to the hottest one of them all, track pace, which shows you all sorts of things like G-force on your left, speed and accelerator and brake pedal positions on the right. And in the center, a very prominent gear indicator and a very interesting take on a tachometer. On the center screen, more of the same, but it's a more detailed view of exactly how much power you're using, including the actual number of power and torque. Now at its very hottest setting, this car is really impressive. I have to say, perhaps the most impressive part is that body control is just so good for an SUV. There's surprisingly little body roll. And couple that with immense grip from the four-wheel drive system, and the G-forces could really tug at your cheeks. It's got a pretty high limit of grip. And certainly on these wet roads like we have today, I don't intend to exceed them. Then we got to talk a bit more about the powertrain because, like I said, power delivery is just incredibly strong, and at its raciest setting, this 9-speed MCT AMG gearbox is just so aggressive with its shifts. It's just what you want. Slam, 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 gear after gear, and even more so when you put it into manual mode. But I gotta say, race mode, left in automatic, it's actually very, very capable. And while it does rev to a pretty substantial 7-ish thousand RPM, it doesn't feel particularly rev happy. In fact, it feels overtly turbocharged, like when you accelerate, you're stepping on a pressure plate rather than an accelerator pedal, if you know what I mean. The performance is all there, it's just a little sanitized. It's also worth noting that while the e-turbocharger has helped reduce turbo lag quite a bit, it's not completely eliminated it, and there are certain off-boot situations where you can catch it off guard. Something that also deserves a very strong mention is the steering. Apart from being great to hold with this nice Alcantara grip, it's very sharp, very accurate. Okay, it's perhaps lacking that last degree of feel, but I think I can forgive it that in a big SUV like this. But it is one of the better steerings out there, I have to give it that. The agility with which you can tuck the nose of this, let's be honest, pretty big car into corners is really quite amazing. And that's no doubt helped by the rear wheel steering. Even though it's just 2.5 degrees of rear wheel steering, it makes a difference. But a big part of the appeal of this 43 series of cars, both the GLC and the C, is that they're a halfway point to the full-on 63 AMG, and that means they have to have a degree of usability. And that's where perhaps this new version isn't quite so good. You start to notice that when you dial it way back down to comfort mode, and though it gets a little bit quieter on the inside, everything else still remains quite sporty, and that's not necessarily what you want. For instance, the steering is still quite heavy, and though the rear wheel steering does help with agility in the corners, when it comes to just basic maneuverability like taking a U-turn, you realize the turning circle is really still quite vast. The quieter setting for the engine means you hear a whole lot more of the road rolling under those massive 21-inch wheels and tires. And the powertrain doesn't feel like it lightens up or loosens up enough for comfort mode, you know. Now in an all-out sports car, yeah, that might be understandable, but then this is a GLC 43, an SUV, a family car. You want it to have an easy setting, and considering there are so many drive modes, perhaps the comfort setting could have been comfier. It's a similar story with the racy AMG MCT gearbox, which though incredible at high speeds can feel clunky and indecisive at times at traffic speeds. But I think by far the biggest compromise you make is to ride quality. And that's not just down to this excellent looking set of 21-inch wheels. I think if you are in the market for this car, stick to the standard 20 inches. But it's also down to the suspension setup on its own. Even in the comfort setting, it's just too firmly sprung. You will be constantly moved around inside the cabin, even on a pretty average road surface. And on this completely broken up road like this, well, I'm actually driving a little bit slowly because I don't want to damage one of these rims or the tires. And on that note, just because this is an SUV with higher ground clearance and four-wheel drive, don't think it's an invitation to go off-roading. No. The wheels and tires are your first clue. And though it does have the ground clearance, it doesn't have a lot of wheel travel. The suspension is stiff and it doesn't give you much movement. So yeah, it's as good as a slightly high-riding sports car. Think of it that way. So it's not quite as friendly a daily driver as we'd hoped, but that's simply because the 43 series on the whole seems to have moved up into more serious, focused AMG territory. Where it's also moved up is in price, thanks to all that new tech and it being a full import this time. And though we don't know the exact number at the time of filming, Mercedes calls it a TEV, a top-end vehicle, which means it will cost over 1 crore. At that price, and for the weight that the AMG badge carries, yes, there might be some who would have liked to move up to a bigger engine, for bragging rights if nothing else. But one thing's for sure, you cannot deny its potency. All that F1 tech has worked a treat to deliver usable, exploitable performance with sports car-like handling to match, so much that you'd question the need for a full-on AMG 63 variant in a vehicle of this size. It really has become a full-on sports car, albeit one that you can use in almost any condition, even a heavy monsoon day like this one. And with no new direct rivals on the horizon anytime soon, it's got the space all to itself.